Well, let's talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. He's got the
Sure.
Dolphins, Lawrence. I cannot believe we are having a keep it open or close it out combo around the talent that is Marvin Harrison Jr., but it's justified right now. Where do you stand with him going into week number 8?
Yeah, definitely. Well, the good things you like, week 7, 23% target share. He's getting he's had a 23 or better % target share in the last 3 games. The problem here is it's a bottom 8 passing offense in the league. Kyler Murray's averaging under 200 passing yards per game. So there's problems with them connecting, maybe some separation on Harrison Jr.'s part. And then you got the fact that Miami has the number 1 pass defense in the NFL by far, actually. They've only allowed 2 receiving touchdowns this year to receivers and only 8.5 receptions per game to receivers. Not like 1 receiver, all receivers per game. Like, that's a scary number, actually. So, despite him being the Cardinals' number 1 wide receiver versus this defense, I have to close it out. Until, we see more consistency. He started to come along a few weeks back. Give him grace because he left the game in week 6. But, it's gotten to be consistently low production. So need to see a little something. So
Listen,
I'm closing it out.
I get it, Lawrence, right? He hasn't seen an end zone target since week 4. He's had under 50 receiving yards in 5 of his 7 games this year. Yes, he left the 1 game early as well. And you saw the graphic there on your screen. It just, for whatever reason, him and Kyler Murray aren't on the same page. Only 55% of his targets this year have been deemed catchable, Connor. Having said all that, you see it right there. You see it right there on your screen, whereas opposed to Dortch, Wilson, and McBride, all 76% or higher in terms of catchable targets. And to the eye test, Kyler Murray's played fine. He's had some throws I think he'd want back.
He's done enough.
He's done enough. It's just whatever reason, him and Marvin Harrison Jr. are not on the same page. Having said all that, I'm still keeping it open on Marvin Harrison. Now listen, barely, right? He's my wide receiver 27, so he's barely a wide receiver 3 for me this week. But Ayuk and Debo and Godwin and Mike Evans, and it's just there's just so many wide receivers that are beat up or banged up. We don't know if Cooper Kupp is coming back this week. It's just, I don't know that too many people are going to have the luxury of saying, you know what, I've got Marvin Harrison. He's obviously somebody I drafted in the first couple of rounds of my draft, and I have the depth to be able to say, MHJ, you just sit on the bench because I got, whatever. I got Jalen McMillan. So I just feel like if there's some positives that his last 5 healthy games that Marvin Harrison Jr. has played, he's gotten 29% target share. He's gotten 55% of the team's end zone targets, so at least he's getting some of those end zone targets, right? They're just not looking. They just haven't been in the end zone the last 2 games very much as well. And there was a bad drop last week, but I do remember that one game, that week 2 game, 4 for 130 and 2 touchdowns. So we know the upside is there. The upside is there for Marvin Harrison Jr. So again, reluctantly, I'm keeping it open. I get the matchup thing, but just nice win for Arizona against the Chargers last week. I feel like this is similar to what you're starting to hear, kind of the squeaky wheel kind of stuff. Why isn't he getting more involved?
Right.
And I feel like they'll make a point if they're going to beat Miami
Must
with
win
Tua
for
back.
them too.
For both those guys,
that division is tight.
For sure.
Yeah,
for sure. Open. So he's too good, and now McBride back as well. That's opened up the offense a little bit more. So I'm keeping the light open. I'm keeping it open for Marvin Harrison Jr. reluctantly, but yes.
And maybe some good news in this matchup is with Tua back, the script of this game should have more offensive output than if it was if it was a Tyler Huntley game or any other.
We
Dolphins
can win
backup.
this one. We can win this one 13-10.
Exactly.
Right.
They should
pretty much like how it was versus the Chargers. Just kind of.
They love playing that way.
Yeah.
The Chargers.
James
This is a better
does
script.
his thing. Yeah.
Right, and Kyler's like, all right, I'm going to run for one, and we're going to run it down, and we're going to kick a last-second field goal, and we're going to win, 17-16. That's not going to work against Tua with Hill and Waddle.
You can't. Our next wide receiver, DeVonta Smith, he's got the Bengals. He's got 4 catches in 2 games since he's been back, Matthew. It's just been a slow stretch for DeVonta Smith. And last week, throw it out the window. The Eagles didn't need to really do anything through the air against the Giants.
They threw it 15 times. They only attempted 15 passes. And so I get it that DeVonta Smith only had 2 targets. But again, 2 targets on 15 pass attempts as well. I'm keeping it open on DeVonta Smith. He's too talented. So is Jalen Hurts. So far this season, even despite last week, and actually the last 2 weeks, He's got a 25% target share on the year. He's had at least 8 targets in 3 of the 5 games the Birds have played. And every game prior to last week, he's had at least 14 fantasy points. It's worth noting over the last month, the Bengals are bottom 12 in terms of most fantasy points allowed to opposing wide receivers. So DeVonta Smith, I think, is due for a big bounce back week. I'm keeping it open. He's my wide receiver 21 this week. Again, I just don't know that you have the luxury of benching him this week given all the injuries that are happening in the world of wide receiver this week.
And to be honest with you, Matthew, I would keep it open even without the injuries for DeVonta Smith, just because of how I believe this game could go. You could say, the Bengals defense has gotten a little better over the past few weeks. Well, they played the Giants and they've played the Browns. But when they played the Ravens and the Commanders, those games are back and forth. I actually think this game could go similar to how the Bengals and Ravens went a couple weeks ago. You look at the over-under here, it's 47.5. That's the third highest of all the Week 8 games. So DeVonta Smith didn't catch a lot of passes over the past couple weeks, but one of those went for a 45-yard touchdown, catch and run. So DeVonta Smith obviously has that in his bag as well. So I'm going to keep it open on the Slim Reaper.
The Bills and Keon Coleman have Seattle. Keon Coleman with his best week of his career so far last week. Now, Lawrence, the caveat with this is Amari Cooper is being slowly phased into this offense. A lot of Coleman's production came when Cooper was not on the field.
Yeah, I'm very proud of Keon Coleman for having that game, right?
Why?
Why?
Yeah, why are you personally proud?
He's his uncle.
Yeah, I'm his uncle. I've always believed in him. He gets a thing for not being able to separate, which is, it ain't a lie, you know what I'm saying? Right. But
that's a knock on me as well. Right?
You find a way to overcome.
He's a good ball carrier. Obviously, we know he can go up and get the ball. But look, he plays 75% of the snaps. That's good too, right?
It is.
The thing about that is, so did Mac Hollins.
Yep.
So both of those guys, will take a step down once Amari Cooper gets more integrated into the offense. And just to see what Amari Cooper was able to do playing the low percentage of snaps, just let you know that obviously it's going to be Amari Cooper, and then it's going to be every other receiver get in where you could fit in. So, Keon Coleman will have his games. He'll score some touchdowns here and there, but I don't know that the volume will be to the tune of 7 targets per game. One, because I don't even think the Bills is trying to play football like that. And 2, you have a new wide receiver 1. You still got Dalton Kincaid. You got Khalil Shakir, who Josh Allen trusts. So I'm going to close it out. This week for the young Keon Coleman.
I agree with you, Lawrence. I'm also going to close it out. You hinted at this, Connor. You talked about it. Like, the fact is that for as much production as Keon Coleman had last week, the 4 for 125, also should have had a touchdown, or had a chance at it, got overturned. It bobbled a little bit. But all 4 of Keon Coleman's receptions came when Amari Cooper was off the field. Amari Cooper, again, just to put a number on it, only played 33% of the snaps last week, which makes sense. He had just gotten there a couple of days before. But the theory is that as Amari Cooper ramps up, he's going to play more and more snaps, Lawrence. This is what you were saying as well. And so at best, Keon Coleman is the 4th passing option on this balanced Bills offense. I think you would argue, obviously you've got Amari Cooper and Dalton Kincaid. I would argue that Khalil Shakir in the slot is probably a more viable pass catcher in terms of more targets and more looks, more routes run than Keon Coleman. I get that he's out there a lot.
He's going to be out there, but it's just like.
Yeah, but maybe it's Mac Hollins, maybe it's Keon Coleman on the other side. We don't know how the Bills are going to go, but this is a balanced offense. They like to run the ball. And then when Josh Allen is going back to throw, he's going to look for Cooper, Kincaid, Shakir, and maybe Coleman. But again, they also use Samuel a little bit. They use Mac Hollins a little bit. It just Dawson Knox every once in a while shows up with a touchdown in the red zone. Curtis Samuel. I'm closing it out. You saw it there on my ranks. He's my wide receiver 46 for me this week. If you're starting him, you're hoping he catches one long one. But I think last week was a little bit of a mirage if you didn't watch the game closely.
Coleman's big play dependent. And honestly, coming out of college, his profile was a player that, from a fantasy points perspective, is big play dependent, touchdown dependent. So
I'm in a dynasty league where somebody traded Saquon Barkley for Keon Coleman. drove me up a wall.
Any draft assets?
Yeah, they traded it's a team that's a bottom dweller that is going to be a bottom dweller again, and so they traded Saquon Barkley and a third, what's going to be a low third, for Keon Coleman and what will be a high first. So it's a team that's a title contender. And like on theory,
it's not a move I would make
it's not a move I would make, and I think the bottom dweller team should have basically said to the league, to the bunch of contenders, I'm one of the contenders, and I'm not the team that was able to get Saquon Barkley, so obviously I'm a little bit of a bitter berry here. But I think the bottom dwelling team should have said, like, hey, contenders, Saquon's on the block, who's interested?
Right.
And I think that team would have gotten a better offer than Keon Coleman and a 1. Right, you create a bidding war,
right
and
now
so
you could win 2 titles with Saquon in the next 2 years.
100%, and it's a bottom dwelling team that has been bottom dwelling since the league has started for like 5 years and doesn't seem to have a direction. This particular manager traded. It's a super flex league and traded a young quarterback for Saquon last year. And so you're like, at the time the rest of the league was like, why are you trading a young quarterback for Saquon,
who's in a terrible position at the time?
Who's in a terrible position at the time, and he's a hurt running back, and you're like, and you need to rebuild. You know what I mean? Like, quarterbacks have much longer shelf life.
Yes.
Anyway, I was going to say don't get me started. I've already started.
Brian Thomas or something.
Right.
Thank you.
More upside.
Much more upside. I just dynasty-wise, I think there's a lot of young wide receivers I like better.
I agree.
Than Keon Coleman. So it was a weird one. But just so you know what's out there on those streets. Maybe if you have Keon Coleman, we're closing it out in redraft, but if you have him in Dynasty, maybe you could get a pretty penny for him.
Our last player here, Pat Freiermuth against the Giants. Pat Freiermuth only has 1 game this season with double-digit fantasy points. The good news is, Lawrence, maybe with Russell Wilson under center, there's a little bit more here for Freiermuth, although how much?
Nah, he had the catch of his life in that game versus the Jets. And then, look, taking his low, volume out of it, the Giants haven't allowed a touchdown to a tight end yet this season, and they allow 4 receptions and 35 yards per game to the tight end position. Then, I talked about it earlier with Tracy, this game is over under 35. This is going to be another Najee Harris type of game, so I'm closing it out on Freiermuth.
He's had under 40 receiving yards in 5 of 7 games. He has yet to see an end zone target this year. He's a tight end. He has yet to see an end zone target this year. 3 straight games with a target share below 15%. You mentioned the low nature of this game, and also that the Giants do, in fact, there's a lot of issues with the Giants, but they do defend the tight end pretty well. Their defense overall is playing well. It's the offense that's a challenge as well. So he's my tight end 20 this week. Darnell Washington's playing more snaps than I think we might have expected.
They threw him the ball more than they did to Freiermuth.
I'm just saying.
A little rollout.
Yeah,
exactly.
Get
out his way when he did.
So we love saying Muth, but we're going to also bench. I was trying to make it work, and it didn't really.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a bridge too far.
At least you let it go quickly.
They can cut that out. It's all good.
No, they're not going to cut it out.
Let it ride.
Leave it. They're going to leave it. I look forward to the YouTube comments about that one. That one.
Matthew,
So you got to stay off the YouTube comments, man.
I actually know. In all seriousness, the YouTube comments were much nicer and much more fun than I thought. It's actually a great audience on YouTube. Actually, we're very appreciative of you guys.
Here's Matthew's Keep It Open or Close It Out rankings recap here. Dak ends up being a close, obviously, in single quarterback leagues at QB 19. If you're in something like the League of Assholes, totally different story. Jordan Mason, keep that one open. He's RB 15. Much better matchup on deck against the Cowboys. Tyrone Tracy Jr. is a close for now. We just got to see how the Giants actually choose to use him and if that offense can get going at all. Don't expect it against the Steelers. Marvin Harrison Jr. was a close for Lawrence, but an open for Matthew. He's wide receiver 27. DeVonta Smith, keep it open, wide receiver 21 in a game where scoring should be pretty high against the Bengals. Keon Coleman close at wide receiver 46. Amari Cooper will play more snaps this week. Pat Freiermuth's a close at tight end 20. There's just not the volume you need from him, even though the tight end landscape is brutal right now.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotoWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest RotoWorld fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.